Everything he had was gone. His home, ashes. His family, taken. And the men who were supposed to have his back were talking about killing him. This is the lowest point in David's entire life. Not on a battlefield, not facing a giant. In the ashes of his own town, surrounded by men who wanted him dead. And what he does in the next 10 minutes changes everything. David and 600 men had been marching for 3 days, coming home from a war they weren't even part of, turned away by an army that didn't trust him. So they head back to Ziklag, the one place that was supposed to be safe. Only there's smoke on the horizon before they even reach the gate. Ziklag is burned to the ground. Every house, every tent, gone. And their wives, their sons, their daughters, taken captive by raiders while the men were away. Scripture says David and his men wept. Wept until, and this is the exact wording, they had no more power to weep. Not a poetic exaggeration, a body that has physically run out of the capacity to cry. That's how deep this goes. And then it gets worse. The grief in his men turns into rage, and that rage turns on David. The people spoke of stoning him. His own soldiers, men who had followed him through caves, through exile, through years of running, now ready to kill him, because grief needs somewhere to go, and he was standing right there. This is the moment. Everything stripped away. No home, no family in front of him, no army behind him, only an army against him. And Scripture gives us one of the quietest, most powerful lines in the entire Old Testament. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Here's what's easy to miss if you read that verse too fast. David doesn't suppress what he's feeling. He'd already wept until his body had nothing left to give. This isn't a man pretending to be fine. What happens next is something modern psychology has a name for: self-regulation under acute crisis. Not the absence of pain, the capacity, even inside devastating loss, to pause before reacting. Most people in that exact moment do one of two things. They collapse or they lash out. Grief looking for a direction, any direction, just to stop the unbearable stillness of not knowing what to do. David's men chose the second option. Rage pointed outward at the nearest target. David does something almost unnatural in that state. He doesn't let the crowd's fear decide his next move. He doesn't let his own panic decide it either. He deliberately reconnects to something steady before he does anything else. Not a plan yet, not a strategy, just grounding before movement. This is the part worth sitting with. Rock bottom rarely hands you clarity first. It hands you noise, other people's rage, your own exhaustion, 100 voices telling you what to do right now. And the turning point in this story isn't a miracle, it's a choice, made in complete darkness with no evidence yet that anything would get better. Only after that, only after he steadied himself, does David move. He calls for the priest. He inquires of God directly. Shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them? And the answer comes back clear. Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. Notice the order. Grounding first, direction second, action last. Not action first, hoping grounding would catch up later. David and his men set out. 200 of them too exhausted to cross the final stretch, and David doesn't leave them behind in shame, a detail that matters later. Along the way, they find an abandoned Egyptian servant left to die by the very raiders they're chasing, starving, forgotten. David feeds him, and that forgotten, discarded man becomes the one who leads them straight to the enemy camp. The recovery isn't instant, it isn't clean, but when they reach the camp, Scripture says it plainly. Nothing was missing, young or old, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. Everyone, everything, fully restored. And when they return, David makes a decision that becomes law in Israel. The exhausted 200 who couldn't make the final march share equally in the recovered spoil with the men who fought. Because in David's eyes, showing up steadied and showing up exhausted were both still showing up. Rock bottom doesn't require you to have the whole plan today. It requires one honest, deliberate act of grounding before your next move, before you let panic decide, before you let rage decide, before the loudest voices around you decide what happens next. You don't need to know how the story ends yet. David didn't either, not when he was weeping until he had nothing left, and not when his own men were reaching for stones. He just did the one thing in front of him. He strengthened himself first. Everything else followed. If you're standing in your own version of Ziklag's ashes right now, you don't need the whole plan today. You need one honest moment of strengthening before your next step. Subscribe to BibleRisen. We tell one story like this every week.